Hello, friends. Welcome to another one of these surprise stories that God brings to life when you least expect them. Some of you know that for decades, I have read Jeremiah 33:3, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not." And through the years, God has just done surprising things over and over again. And so I sort of claim that every day, but things don't happen every day. They happen when I least expect them. And I've actually got a list here. In very, very tiny little writing, there's over 800 just little notes to remind me of some surprising thing that God did for me on that particular day. So I'm going to add the one I'm just going to tell you about. I'm going to add it to my list. So our church here is bringing over a missionary family that we've supported for many, many years. And it is very complicated to do this legally in order to not have to put them up in a hotel for 2 weeks. We have to get a letter of invitation, it has to come connected to one of our homes, somebody who owns a home, and a whole bunch of paperwork, red tape, and of course, expenses, fees, and taxes. So I've been on this thing, and yesterday I went to the police station, which is in San Sebastian, the capital. And I mean, it basically takes the entire morning. So I get there. I thought I had everything. I had the reservation for the appointment and all of that, and I sent them my stuff, and the guy was being very persnickety, and in the end, he said he would take what I had, but I still needed a document that I had to get from City Hall here telling them how many people live in our house and how many rooms are in the house and so forth. So I was not a happy camper to come back yesterday. We're a little late because they're coming in just a couple of weeks, and we just realized we've got to do this way. There's no other way we can do it. And so I came back yesterday, and the guy who dealt with me got a little nicer towards the end, and he said, well, if you can get that document from the city hall, come back tomorrow. I'll give you an appointment. I'll squeeze you in at 11:30. No way you could get this appointment online at this time. No way. They're weeks out. And so I said, okay, well, I'll go to the city hall and see if they can give me this on the spot. So this morning I go to the city hall, and sure enough, they're very friendly, and they gave me, on the spot, they gave me this document about our apartment here. So I drive to the city again, to the capital, and park and walk. It's about a 15-minute walk from where I park, and I get there at 11:30 and tell them I don't have an appointment, but the guy said to come, my name would be on the list, and sure enough, it was. And so I go and sit down and wait, and a guy comes a few minutes later and calls my name, and so I follow him into the room of offices, one of them being the guy who had dealt with me yesterday. But this was a different guy who was calling me in, and he said, okay, come over here. So he looks through all of my paperwork and the new one, and he's very friendly and doesn't seem like there's going to be any problem with it. And he's putting in data and looking through the documents, and he said, wow, you've been here quite a while. And I said, yeah. I said, what does your information say? When does it say that I came? And I was very curious. And he said 1982. Well, that makes no sense. We got here in 89 as a couple, but I came as a boy, as an MK with my parents in 73. And I said, well, actually, it's not 82, it's 70. I've been here since 73. And he said, wow. Of course, way older than he is. And so we were just sort of chit-chatting a little bit, and he says, oh, you a pastor? And I said, yeah. I said, in fact, this couple's coming for a kind of a conference that we're having. And he says, he looks at me through this, plexiglass. He says, my uncle is an evangelical pastor. And I said, oh, really? That's not very common at all here. I said, wow. I said, where? And he says, Talavera de la Reina. And then I said, man, I know that. I know that place. I've heard of that. And what's his name? And he said, Alberto Gutierrez. And I said, man, that rings a bell. And so we started talking, and I had to go out and pay some things at a bank and came back. And so to shorten the story, I didn't know his uncle by the name Alberto, but by another name, and because he said his uncle was from Uruguay, and I said, man, that all sounds really a lot like a couple that I know there that I've not seen in many years, but they're down there and they're missionaries, they're Baptist missionaries. Well, so we finally tied it all together, and I did some WhatsApp here this afternoon to just nail down exactly who this is. Anyway, I had all the paperwork, all the meeting, and that went well. I have to go back next week to get the final papers and so forth. But I get back, and so to shorten the story, this young man, his name is Sebas, like Sebastian, but a shortened version of that name. He lives in Gijón, which is, let me say, I put the numbers out here. He lives in a city 230 miles from here. Completely different part of Spain. If this was Greenville, South Carolina, it would be like Nashville, Tennessee, or Raleigh. That's how far it would be for those of you who are familiar with the Southeast. He lives there, and his mother lives there, and his grandmother. And his uncle, who we knew, they're Baptist missionary. I said, yeah, I'd seen him at camp. We saw each other, many times, a long time ago, mostly, not too recently, but we would meet at camp. His uncle, who's the pastor, the Baptist missionary, lives down in Talavera de la Reina, which is southern Spain, really. And it is 340 miles from here. So it would be equivalent of Greenville, South Carolina, a guy from Nashville, not in a church context. This is totally secular context. He's working in Greenville. The guy from Nashville is working in Greenville, and his uncle, who's a pastor that I know, is in what would be the equivalent of Jacksonville, Florida. So, and this guy was not there yesterday, and he's not going to be there next week. My only shot at knowing him was today, and for some reason, the other guy was busy, and so he took over my paperwork. And I said, that is incredible. How can that happen if that isn't a divine appointment? And so I've been texting with his uncle over the past hour a little bit. And so I gave, it was public offices there. I had no real way to get in any further information. Didn't want to distract him. And so I gave him, when I left, I gave him one of my Peace in the Heart gospel booklets, and I don't know. That's it. But the chance of me meeting that guy is so randomly connected to someone that is a Baptist pastor in this country where there are very, very, very few. I thought that was quite a surprise, and the Lord does amazing things. So I thought some of you would enjoy another one of these unusual stories of how God just puts events together and orchestrates all the details in such a timely fashion that it couldn't happen any other way. And the fact that he happened to mention that his uncle was a pastor, and just the way the conversation went, it was so random. But it wasn't random. It was a gift from the Lord. So anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.